ladies and gentlemen, members of TEDxYouth and students. My name is Anthony Egan, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the role of government in education. What should the role of government be in education? Should governments own schools? Should they regulate curriculum? Should they try to control teacher unions? What is the role of government in education? This has been a perennial question across time, across many generations. Aristotle once said, education should be regulated by law and should be the affair of the state. This is because Aristotle believed the aim of education was to produce a good citizen, a good and moral citizen, in order for the state to function. Therefore, you needed a strong centralized authority that was going to regulate education in the interest of the state. So, what does that mean for us? We are aiming, if we believe Aristotle, to try to produce good citizens. If that's the role of education, then we need an excellent education system in to be able to achieve that function. So, is our education system excellent? That is the question. Let us look at some data, international data, to make some comparisons and look at how the US education system is competing internationally in order to find out. Behind me, we have the Tower of Pisa. Nothing to do with the PISA study, 2018. The PISA study is a program for international student assessment. It's an international benchmark of education standards across countries. In 2018, the US was recorded at 13th position in reading, 36th position in math, and 19th in science. These are very average figures, especially the math figure. It's mid-table ranking for the United States. In comparison to other countries who are up at the top of the table, such as Hong Kong, such as Singapore and Finland, these countries have far higher rankings in the PISA survey. In addition, these countries spend less money on education than the United States. The United States spends $13,000 per pupil in education, significantly higher than other countries. The US is the second highest spender in education globally. So, the problem of education in the United States does not, at first glance, seem to be one of money. So let's look at some statistical data from Baltimore. Baltimore is a US city that has a lot of social disadvantage. In 2014, the math study in Baltimore, 13 schools had no students pass the statewide exams. 6 additional schools, only 1% passed. In English, 15% of the students in the school passed the test. This is not a functioning school by any measure, any justifiable measure. This is not a functioning school. This school has clearly failed the people in Baltimore. 1,804 students took the state exam in math in Baltimore, and 14 passed. This is a disaster. This is not functioning in the proper way a school is supposed to function. So is this because of money? Again, just like the international rankings, the US spends a lot of money. In Baltimore, they are the 3rd highest spend per pupil in the United States. So why are they lagging behind? Well, it's very difficult to fire teachers. There's a lot of educational problems in the city. Unions dominate education. There's a lot of crime. There's a lot of vandalism in the schools. And there's very little discipline. So what is the solution to this problem? The solution is to bring the market into education. Allow the market system to work better. One way to do that is to give student vouchers. Vouchers are a way to allow the market mechanism into the education system. Students get the vouchers, and they can choose where they go to school. Imagine that, giving students choice. Wow. They can choose religious schools, they can choose private schools if it's allowed, or they can go to charter schools. My personal favorite. A charter school is a school that is privately owned, usually by a trust or a charity, and is funded by the state. It essentially is a public-private partnership. I'm going to look now at some schools in New York that are charter schools and that have high levels of success. Thomas Sowell, my own all-time favorite economist, has written extensively on the charter school system in New York. And he's provided data on some very specific schools and how they're successful. In 2018, in New York, there were, across the state exam system, we can compare different schools to rank their achievement. For example, charter schools and state schools are in the same building. Often, they're in the same building. Yet, and they actually have the same type of student attending both schools in terms of demographic and ethnicity. Yet the results vastly vary. Mr. Sowell investigated 28 schools in New York and found where their schools are sharing the same premises as the state school, and found that in those schools, 10% of the students at the state school passed the exam, whereas in the charter school, that number was 81 to 100%. One school in Harlem had a higher rate of passing the state exam than any other school in the state, and this is a poor school. Another school with an average income of $49,000 had higher achievement than school districts where the average income is 5 times the amount. So here's my question. If this is so successful, why can it not be replicated in other places? Well, to get into the charter school, first of all, it is difficult. Because it's underprovided and underallocated, the way they allocate places in charter schools is through a lottery system. And right now, there are 50,000 spaces available at New York charter schools that parents want to go. Parents know what's best for their children. They love their children, and they don't want their children going to failing state schools. So, how can we correct this? One of the problems the voucher system and charter schools will address is the problem of the lottery. How can we get more spaces rather than less spaces? Teacher unions are responsible for limiting the spaces in charter schools. Because teacher unions control, often politicians, and the politicians court teacher unions in order to gain votes. So they give teacher unions what they want. And one thing teacher unions don't want is schools where there aren't teacher unions, such as charter schools. Teacher unions raise the salaries of their members. Teacher unions campaign for better hours. They campaign for more staff in the schools. But an effect of that is lower student-teacher ratios, but higher cost to education. So teacher unions are raising the cost of education for students. And they're not providing good quality education. They're restricting choice for students. This government influence and their relationship with unions is a malignant force in our education system. And it is very difficult to stop it and change it. That's why if we have more charter schools, we'll be able to weaken the power of unions and be able to improve education for the most vulnerable people in the United States and around the world. The other area where government influence is also felt is in influence on the curriculum. Governments like to control curriculum. In the modern education system, we have a very focused child-centric curriculum. Now, child-centric curriculum sounds fantastic. The children should be the center of education. Education should revolve around them and what they want. But should it, though? Are they really the center? Or is education higher than them? Is it higher than the teacher? Is there something in education that's more than this? And merely creating activities that are student-led and fun for them, is this the way we should be going? In modern education, we have this idea that knowledge is somehow, of the teacher, is not valued enough. The teacher doesn't need to be knowledgeable. Why do they? The children have the internet. They have Google. They have Siri. Why would they need the teacher? The teacher can't possibly compete with Siri and Google. So why do we need these expert teachers? Give them an iPad and let them research. But that misses an entire area of education, and what I call classical education. Now, in classical education talks about memorizing things. Memorizing things is important. Yet in the modern education system, we're totally discouraged to do this. So why is memorization important? For one, we can get kids to memorize poetry. But why would you do that? Why would you want kids to memorize poetry? Well, there are great epic poems from history. They teach us something valuable in their own right. Learning poetry can improve your language. It can improve your memory. It can teach you lessons that you don't get from the world. It can help you to code language in your brain. The second thing that I try to do with my daughter, who plays the piano, is I try to get her to try and play music from memory, rather than from reading the notes. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that people who can play music from memory are better musicians than people who read the notes. They're more emotionally invested in their music. The last thing is dictation. Dictation involves reading a passage to a student, getting them to repeat it back to you, and then getting them to write it down. And then they have to use all parts of their mind. They have to write the correct grammar, spell the words properly, make the sentence make sense. And they're doing this in their mind. They're learning an awful lot of things simultaneously. I have done this for my daughter. So I have purchased a book from the United States that was delivered to me on Amazon, where I teach her poems and she learns them each night. And I also do dictation with her to improve her grammar and writing. And it does work. It's an interesting concept. But it goes against the modern concept of education. You're not meant to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, today I have looked at education. I've looked at classical education and modern education. I've argued that the role of government can, at times, while necessary in funding education, can result in some major problems. Firstly, we need to decide if governments should own school systems, or should they be privatized and allow market forces to work, and allow low-cost options to develop for students, where they have choice and they can really achieve their dreams and they're not stuck in failing schools, dominated by teacher unions that are only obsessed with their interests and not the interests of the students. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to see the ranking of US schools increase globally. I think if we adopt some of these ideas, we can definitely improve our global ranking. Remember, the goal of education, according to Aristotle, is to improve citizens, to make citizens better, so society is better. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe if we can reform our education system through market forces and removing negative influence of government, we can utterly transform education and make it into what Aristotle wanted, into something great. Thank you very much for listening.